when you're an entrepreneur running a company, you're always doing something. 24/7, you're trying to figure out what's the next thing for your company, what's the next initiative, how do you move forward. I find sometimes in life you have to say yes, even if you're not sure that you can do it, because you'll hopefully rise to the occasion.
As soon as you're putting stuff out there and there's some expectation of you, it kind of forces you to stay on your game, because it's very easy, especially as a trader, and traders being kind of a lone wolf game sometimes if you don't have a community around you, to slack.
You can't be in everything, and so you're going to have to get comfortable with missing out. The problem is that when people see something move, and instead of just saying, hey, I missed out on that, or I should wait for a good entry spot, they jump on it, and that's usually when it reverses, and that's why you get people often that will just chew up their account trying to chase the hottest thing instead of just sticking to what they know.
Okay, everyone, welcome back to the channel where I am interviewing traders on behalf of Trade Ideas. I'm really excited for this one. I'm not going to gush too much, but we have Brian Lund, who I am a massive fan of. I've mentioned a few times, we've bumped into on Spaces. I didn't even tell him this in the green room before we got started, but we're going to talk a bit about, he wrote one Substack that actually brought a tear to my eye. So we'll chat about that after you're done introducing yourself. But I love his Substack over at the Lund Loop. So I'm excited to get his view on the market and how he likes to approach trading. So Brian, just tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
I think you set the bar a little too high here, Michael. I don't know if I can get up there before the interview's over. Well, you did a great job. I'm Brian Lund. I'm an active trader. I've been a trader since, I placed my first trade in 1985. So I've been trading for over 37 years. Like you mentioned, I write a Substack, and you can find me on Twitter, and I'm around. So
cool. Yeah, so first of all, I guess I won't leave the people hanging with the one. I tried to look it up. I was spending about 10 minutes looking it up before the interview, but it was a Substack that you wrote once, and it was essentially about, I believe it was your daughter, and you had kind of worded as the daughter I knew or died, or the child I knew died, and the Substack was about just kind of the moments in children's life that you have and then they're gone. And I remember reading it because I was out on the back deck and we had just had my first child. So I had my son in my arms and I'm reading this shit. I'm like, oh, Jesus. So I remember I was like, and my wife comes out and she's like, she just sees me on the phone. She's like, what are you doing? You look all worked up. So I remember I tweeted something at you, and I don't know if you got it, but a mutual friend of ours, Chicago Sean, I guess Option Sean now, he knew exactly what I was talking about. So he actually gave me a call and started laughing. He's like, Lund punched you in the feels at the right moment there, didn't he? Yeah. So it's great. I love the that it's kind of a good cross section of, here's some charts like everyone else does. But again, I really like the writing you do, and I think a lot of it's just kind of jealousy, because I stand up here and talk, but I can't write worth a damn. So before we get into all the trading nonsense, how and why did you start writing? Was it a way for your own trading, or was it something that you wanted to kind of turn into a service immediately, or what was the story behind that?
Yeah, so like you said, I've been trading since 1985, but for most of that time, I was doing other things. I had a business that I ran, and one of the luxuries you have about owning your own business is you can sit at your desk all day and trade while your employees think that you're working for the company, right? So I did that for a number of years, and then in 2005, I decided to sell my company and trade full time. And it was a really rough transition, because when you're an entrepreneur, when you're running a company, you're always doing something, right? 24/7, you're trying to figure out what's the next thing for your company, what's the next initiative, how do you move forward? And so I took that frenetic mindset, that pace, into trading, right? So I sold my company. Final Friday I was there. Next Monday I started to trade full time. I should have taken a month off and just relaxed, but I didn't. And so what happened was, I found myself always wanting to do something in the market, just like I had done with my business. And I found myself over trading a lot, right? So after about 2 years, in about 2007, I finally figured it out. And I said, you know what? There's a lot of times in the market when you need to be doing nothing. So what am I going to do during those times? And so I said, well, why not start a blog? So I started an anonymous WordPress blog, just started really talking to myself, just putting on digital paper what I did today, what my trade thought was, how it worked out, not really with any intent to get an audience. And people actually found it. They started asking me questions. And so I would kind of expand on different topics. And then after a year or two of writing and also expanding into like some personal topics, like you mentioned, I got a call out of the blue from Phil Pearlman, who at that time was the head of the StockTwits blog network. Still don't know how he got my number to this day. And he said, "Hey, this is Phil Pearlman from StockTwits." He said, "Bubba, I love your writing. I love your voice. Would you like to join the StockTwits blog network?" And at that time, Howard Linden was writing on it, James
Yep.
Altucher was writing on it, Josh Brown was writing on it, Brian
Hmm.
Shannon. And in my head, I said, there's no way, like, there's no way I belong anywhere close to any of those guys because I love all their writing. But I find sometimes in life you have to say yes, even if you're not sure that you can do it, because you'll hopefully rise to the occasion. So I did. Long story short, people started finding my writing. I wrote for Ticker Tape, TD Ameritrade's Ticker Tape for a while,
Okay.
Yahoo Finance, Daily Finance, and it just kind of evolved from there.
Yeah, and that's awesome. So yeah, Phil Pearlman, great respect for him. How he got your number? I met Phil last time. Last time I met Phil was at Brian's book signing in New York,
Okay.
and I think that was the first time I met Phil in person. And he just seems like a guy that if he wants to get something like your phone number, you're not gonna stop him. I would not want to get on Phil's bad side because he'd find you. He just seems like that kind of personality that'll track you
That's an
down.
accurate description. Yep,
Yeah.
100%.
So it's funny because I I like that you always come at something like this is something I'm doing for myself, and then other people stumble across that because I found that in other people, and I also found that a little bit in myself. I started with the reason I have this relationship now with Trade is I just started a YouTube channel, and it was for the exact same reason. I didn't own a company; I worked at a company that was bought out. So they said, "Here's a little bit of money, away you go," and I said, "Okay, well, I've been trading on the side and doing well in that, so now I'll just trade full time, and I'll be able to make more trades and therefore more money." But like you were talking about, it's not the way at all, right? You get in your own head, you feel like you have to do something every day, that there's something to do in the market every day, and then you end up causing more trouble than it's worth. So it's interesting that it's usually not the person who's like, I'm going to start a Substack because I want to make money, that is successful. It's I have this thing that I feel like I need to do to occupy my time or occupy my hands or something like that. So that's again
Yeah.
awesome, and it's the Lund Loop, and I would check it out.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to your personality type. I had a conversation a long time ago at the very first Stocktoberfest with Josh Brown,
Hmm.
and he is just a machine. Like, he just turns out. Not only does he churn out a lot of content, but it's super high quality content. And at that time, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my content. Am I going to try to be more, I guess, more revealing, more personal, showing all the scars and also, or was I going to be that marketing guy? And kind of the difference there seemed to be between what Josh was doing and what James Altucher was doing, right? And I like James, but he's a little bit more of a marketing guy. And
Hmm.
Josh just said, don't do that, right?
Yeah.
And I said, okay. And for a while, I kind of went on that, hey, let me see if I can optimize my content, and hey, let me see if I can get in marketing channels. It just felt so douchey and so dirty, and I just couldn't do it with any sort of authenticity because it wasn't me. And
Yeah.
so at some point, I checked that and just decided I'm going to do what works for me. Hopefully, that's going to attract a certain reader, right? And that's the sort of reader I want. And that's kind of what we've done with the Lum Loop. I've created this. It's a Substack, but it really is a community, and it attracts a specific type of active trader, long-term investor. Not a lot. It's not broad. I don't tell people, hey, turn $50,000 into 5 million. Right? I talk
Yeah.
about the realities of trading, right, and how you can really get better, but incrementally. And so we've created a community that's people I like, that I want to be in my community. It's not the biggest community, it's not the widest community, but I think it's a quality community.
Yeah, and again, I think that's just super important is to getting the clients that you like because it would be a miserable time to log in every day and to be talking with people, and they all have that expectation of, hey, I'm here and you haven't made a call, how do I make $1 billion of whatever? And I don't even know if you know this, but I am in the Lund Loop Discord, so I'm reading a lot of this stuff too, so I'm checking that out. And yes, there's very much a community aspect of, if somebody has a question about, hey, look at this chart, and there seems to be, I would say, as much community shared charts as there is even Brian Lund shared charts. There's a lot of people with different
100%.
aspects there.
Yeah, in fact, that's how I prefer it because I don't have a monopoly on insights in the market, and I've got two eyes, and we've got about
Hmm.
400 people in the Discord. Maybe 150 to 200 at a given time. That's 300 to 400 eyeballs that are watching different aspects of the market. I think it's great just leveraging that much, that much attention on the market is great because I can't watch everything all the time, nor do I want to.
Cool. So let's get into a little bit more of the, I guess, the nitty gritty of trading. So I'm loving doing this series. I've done a couple interviews this week. I've spoken to some fundamental people, some highly technical, some day trade, some swing trade. I already know a lot of this, but will you tell the people a little bit about your time frame and your style? So what is it that you're looking to get out of the market, and what time frame did you decide to try to get that out of the market, and how, I guess?
So I think the most important thing to talk about right up front whenever we talk about trading is that before anybody puts one dime of risk capital in the market in trading activity, you have to make sure that you have your long-term financial picture taken care of, right? I have
Hmm.
retirement accounts. I've got 529Bs. Everyone should have that as their baseline before they put any money in the world of trading. So I just want to get that out of the way. Having said that, when you have risk capital, what I do with mine is I'll trade any time frame. Right, like I've spent the last 2 weeks scalping Nasdaq futures. Usually, it's a bad sign if I'm doing that, but I'll trade any time frame. But for me, the best time frame, the time frame that gets you the most bang for your buck, meaning the most return for the least amount of activity, is swing trading. Now, unfortunately, the market doesn't really care what I think, and it's not always in a swing trade mode. But that is what I would prefer to do. And that's something from like 3 days to 3 weeks, give or
Okay.
take.
Yeah.
Um, I will day trade if that's the market environment. But I'll be honest, the older I get, the less interested I am in those short term trading activities because
Mhm.
trading is somewhat of a young man or young woman's game. And I do have a life. I've got kids. I've got other things I want to do. And again, that swing trading is a great balance of being able to get a nice return on your positions, but not having to sit there and watch every single tick.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. I'm a swing trader myself, and it was funny. That was kind of the same answer that when we were talking to Brian Shannon, he talked about the same thing. But you did mention something a little bit interesting of adapting your trading style to what the market conditions are. So, how do you determine that? Whether it's, hey, now for me it's a time to swing trade versus a time to day trade versus maybe even longer. Is there ever a time where you're just like, hey, I'm going to look at weekly charts and hold on to stuff? How are you looking at the SPY or the VIX or some combination of everything? What's the process there?
Yeah, so I think that is the secret sauce for trading. I think that's the hardest people for, or the hardest thing for people to master, myself included. I mean, if you take a look at 2022, right? You just had this horrific, horrific market, and the problem was is that when that market went into transition mode, a lot of people didn't recognize that, right? They were so stuck and so anchored into what had happened recently that they were kind of blind to what could happen or what was happening, and they missed out on 2023 and the start of 2024. So for me, in order to identify those transitions, I'm a big chart guy. For intermarket analysis, I look to people like JC Peretz from All Star Charts, right? I
Yeah.
look to people you or trade ideas, like people that have a different perspective on the market, more intermarket analysis. I'll weigh that, but I have to tell you, one of the best indicators I have is really it's kind of bespoke. It's my own trading list. I have two trading lists. One is the active trading list. It's my green trading list. The
Hmm.
other one is I'm sorry. One is my setup trading list, my green trading list. The second one is my orange trading list. I don't know why those are the colors. That's my active list. So what I'm always doing is I'm looking at daily charts and I'm trying to see stocks that are set up ready to trigger. Those go on my green list. Then once they trigger, as long as they're in what I call an active mode, an active sequence, they go onto my orange list. And the reason that I track those is because when you get a stock that breaks out, oftentimes it will break out, it will base, it will break out. We'll do that numerous times over the length of its run, and you have opportunities to either get in if you missed out or to add to a position. What I find is as the length of those two lists ebbs and flows, that tells me a lot about where we are in the market. For example, if I put stocks on my green list, the trigger list, and they're trying to break out, but they don't quite break out. They're trying to break out and they don't quite break out. That's telling me we got a strong bid under the market. If they break out and fail, then maybe right now is a time where I don't want to be swinging. And there's some other subtleties around both those lists, but I've just gotten so in tune with these lists of my own that I can almost tell, on a macro basis when the market is going to cool off, maybe when we're going into a transition, just by how things are coming on and off of those lists.
So that's kind of your own form, I guess, of bottom up analysis. I guess we call it in the CMT. Whereas you'll see most people, they'll start with the S&P 500 and then maybe look at the sectors in it and then look at individual stocks. You've developed this list of stocks that you know very well, and you're using that kind of from the ground up and saying, if these stocks are acting well, then I'm probably in a market that's acting well. Is that a good
Yeah,
summary?
and develop is being very generous. I did not set out to do this. In fact, this is one of the byproducts of having the Lund loop. So I, by nature, am a lazy, lazy person, right? But the one thing that trumps my laziness is my sense of obligation. So when I
Hmm.
started the Lund Loop, initially it was free, and I thought to myself, yeah, I'll just do this. And sometimes I would get to Friday and be like, I don't want to go through all the charts and post
Yeah.
stuff up, or maybe I'd take a day off. What I learned to do is hack myself. I charged a very small amount. Initially, it was like $10 a month, right? Not a lot of money, but to me, if you're going to give me $1, right? To me, that engages my obligation. Like I have an obligation to you, and that trumps my laziness, right? So when I started doing that 5 years ago with the Lund Loop, it got me to where I was just every single day and on the weekends just taking that time to make sure I was looking at my charts, not skipping them, putting them in categories, and that really focused my attention in the markets, got me more in tune with market changes. And it's funny because at that point I've been doing this for 32 years. You think, well, I've got it down, but it just goes to show you you can never stop learning in the market, right? You can always get better at something, and this has just been a really happy, you know, uh, byproduct of having the Lund Loop and having this community.
And I love that. And I think I've heard JC say the same thing, where as soon as you're putting stuff out there and there's some expectation of you, it kind of forces you to stay on your game, because that makes a lot of sense. Where you, it's very easy, especially as a trader, and traders, being a kind of a lonely game sometimes if you don't have a community around you, to slack, to say, I'm just not going to do anything today, or I'm not going to catch up, or I'm not going to write on my journal or record my trades. But so I guess accountability for, like they say, for weight loss goals, sometimes that makes sense, right? You tell people, hey, I'm going to lose X amount of weight in X amount of days, and then that forces you to, every time you see that person, they're going to be judging. So that makes perfect sense to me. So I love the idea of the list and using the list from the ground up. I guess the question is, how do you decide what's on the list? What did you like? How did you build it? And I've noticed, when I'm following your work, that some stuff seems to come and go. Like I've seen a lot more mention, I guess, a lot more mention in the not trolling sense in the marijuana industry recently. That was, and I think rightfully so, a kind of a meme that you were putting out there for a while for a lot of the people who were just pumping that whole sector as it was tanking. But that means at least you were watching it, and so it was at least on some list somewhere. So of the 10,000 tradable securities, how do you decide what's on this list in a manageable way so you're not spending your whole day scanning through charts?
Yeah, so this is again something that I've kind of refined by accident over the years. I used to be one of those guys who wanted to try to find the most exotic out there stock that nobody else found, right?
Hmm.
Some German ADR that traded, 100,000 shares per day. I don't know why. Like I thought maybe that would show how smart I was, but I realized that the market you don't get extra points or extra money for being smarter. So at some point along the line, what I started doing is refining my lists. The first criteria is that I need to have a stock trade. It used to be 1 million shares a day. Now it's probably more like 2, 3, 4 million. Like it
Okay.
has to be liquid. And I
Yeah.
can tell that just by looking at a 5 minute chart. I can pull up a 5 minute chart, and this happens sometimes with stocks that have a big daily turnover. You'll see them be very gappy, right?
Hmm.
I don't want those stocks, right? I don't want stocks that have wide bid and ask. I want stocks that are followed by the market and followed by as many analysts as possible because there's just lesser of a chance that something, you have a biotech stock that nobody follows and the chart looks great. And then all of a sudden they announce some news and it drops 50%, right? That's less likely to happen
Yeah.
with an Apple or something like that. So I've got a universe of stocks pulled from the S&P 500, and then I just rotate in and out of those stocks as they come in and out of favor. I have added stocks over the years, courtesy of a lot of the Lund community, because they'll say, y'all see that they're trading a certain stock, and I'll look at it and say, okay, that fits my criteria, put it in there. So, and then again, there's certain stocks that I just won't trade. Like I'm not a big fan of solar stocks. For some reason, I'm just not really good at trading solar stocks. I've got individual names that I don't do good at. I've never done well with Win. I don't know why. WINN. I've
Shit
never
list. Yeah.
done well. I've never done well with ICE. So I just, for me, it's all about being comfortable with the names, and you can never really know them. Like I don't want to delude myself and say, oh, I know what Apple's going to do, but you do get a sense of how they move and how they trade, and so I'm just totally happy being in those boring stocks over and over as long as I'm making money.
And yeah, I think a lot of traders have, I just call it the shit list. I have something actually in Trade Ideas that says just exclude this symbol from everything that you're going to show me. So for me, it's Yelp. I think I've probably traded Yelp 10 or 15 times and lost money every single time. So that's interesting. So does that necessarily mean that you're missing out if there's a big change in a news cycle, for example? So I'm thinking AI stock. So I guess you'd probably already have something like Nvidia and AMD and everything on the list. Do you ever get the FOMO of, this company comes in and you look at it and you say, well, that would be something that I totally would have traded if I noticed it, but it wasn't on my list? Or have you just kind of gotten over that by now and said, listen, that chasing the dragon, that's for other people, and I'm just going to stick with what I know?
No, I mean, I don't think you ever get over that. I think that's happening with me right now with crypto, right? I'm not in crypto, right? Like I'm the only person in FinTwit that will tell you I'm not in crypto. Like everybody else apparently loaded the boat, 3 months ago and is killing it.
Yeah.
I traded crypto in 2021. I was
Hmm.
lucky enough to get out right before the top in Bitcoin and some other names, Solana, Cardano, what else is there? I think it was traded helium, some other things. And then I've really stayed away from it mostly because I'm not comfortable with it. I know that there's traders out there that will say, well, if it's got a chart, you can trade it. And okay, but I still have never gotten to a comfort level with the quote unquote exchanges that these crypto coins are on. I mean, we just saw something, depending on when this airs, Coinbase the other day, where
Yeah.
people pulled up their accounts and their accounts were zero. Now, it only happened for a little bit, but what if Bitcoin crashed during that time? You couldn't sell it. I don't feel like these exchanges are battle tested. So crypto is something I've really stayed away from. I won't lie. I hate the fact that it's been going through the roof, right? I wish I was in it. But here's the thing, just because I'm not in it doesn't mean I don't put it on my list. I've had Bitcoin on my green list and then onto the active list for the last $25,000 because some of my followers in the Lund Loop, they trade it. But yeah, so it happens. But that's just the nature of being active in the market. You can't be in everything. And so you're going to have to get comfortable with missing out. I think the problem is that when people see something move, and instead of just saying, "Hey, I missed out on that," or "I should wait for a good entry spot," they jump on it, and that's usually when it reverses, and that's why you get people often that will just, you know, chew up their account trying to chase the hottest thing instead of just sticking to what they know.
Again, makes perfect sense. And I like the fact that you're still tracking it even though you're not watching it, because A, there may be equity alternatives. Like, I'll also admit that I'm not, long $1 million worth of Solana or anything, but I have a little bit of Mara and Coinbase, because they're stock equivalents of the same type of thing. The I think that you can also track these things as almost like a risk tool. Like, I kind of look at Bitcoin. I don't get a lot of the utility or whatever behind it either, but I've noticed that it seems to track very well as a risk on, risk off indicator. I think if the market is in a lot of pain and people are worried about their jobs and everything, that you're not going to see Bitcoin ripping as it is. So there are reasons to monitor securities even if you're not going to trade them. I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and even though I don't have Bitcoin, which is up like 100% this year, I bought Facebook in my long-term account when it was down in 110, right? So, you know, got 300% on that, even though I've missed out on 100% in Bitcoin. But if you were to talk to the average person right now, they would think Bitcoin, Bitcoin hot, Facebook, yeah, whatever. But again, at the end of the day, and this is so important, it seems stupid to say it, but at the end of the day, everything that we do, these interviews, these discussions, our time on FinTwit, the Lund, everything, it's all to make money. That's
Hmm.
it. It's not to show how smart you are. It's not to express a political opinion. It is to make money. And ideally, it is to make money to have a better life for yourself, your family. And if you take that attitude, and believe me, it's taken me a long time to get here. Sometimes I forget, but if you take that attitude, if you remember that that's what it's about, I think it's easier. It's not easy, but easier to tune out what's the hot thing today, tomorrow, next week.
Yeah, because it's almost like the told you so's always come out, and that I think causes a lot of FOMO. The right now we're getting it a lot in the Bitcoin of the laser eye people that you haven't heard of for a couple of years are now saying, "See, I'm right." And whenever the market turns and we have some sort of a downtick on it, you'll get all the perma bears coming out saying, "Yeah, I'm right." And it is, as someone who likes to participate in FinTwit and read other people's information and all that stuff, it is hard to also separate and say, okay, I have to stick with my own process, even if I don't sound as smart as this person does right now. I don't know how long they were wrong before they started to become right. And that I always tell people, like, again, I follow your Substack and a couple other friends that I have out there. But for me, it's always about, I do my research first, and then I'll see what other people are doing. And I think that's super important. So this is a question I'm asking everyone. I think it's going to be kind of a theme of these, and I always love the answers to them. Tell me about your worst trade and tell me about what you learned from it. Because every trader I've talked to has had some sort of experience of, I did this really dumb thing or I missed this really awesome move and it changed the way I kind of looked at everything in general. Um, oh, we're back
Yeah,
there.
I'll tell you about two trades. One that worked out, but taught me a really good lesson, and then one that didn't, and it also taught me a good lesson, but not quite as good. So the first one that didn't work out was I was building a position in Oakley, which used to be the symbol OO, the glasses, when they
Oh,
were a
okay.
public
Yeah.
company. This was maybe, God, it had to be 20, 25 years ago. Building a position, and I remember I can count on my on one hand the number of times I haven't been awake when the market opened. Now I'm on the West Coast, so 6:30 in the morning it's open, but usually I'm at my desk at that point. For some reason, I slept in that day, and I didn't put a stop in on my position. Right, so I woke up, found out that there was some news, fundamental news didn't matter. Oakley dropped, and first of all, I would have been stopped out if I had put a stop in place. If I was awake and at my desk, I would have gotten out of the position. But what was worse is I sat there and rationalized what the fundamental information was, even though price was moving against me.
Hmm.
Ended up holding on to this position for maybe 6, 12 months while it continued to go down. I lost about 50% of my account value, which at the time, it was a small account, it was like $20,000. So I lost 10, which doesn't seem a lot, but when you're in your 20s, that seems like a lot of money, right?
Yep.
So I learned that lesson. Like, if you're going to trade, if you have stocks in the market, be it your computer when the market's open, have stops in place and ignore the narrative. That's number one. But the second most important lesson, or maybe even more important, was related to it was during the financial crisis. And there was a news report where the UK had just put a restriction on shorting financial stocks. And it was a
Remember that.
Thursday over here. And I remember thinking to myself, hey, what if we do that here? What if they do that here? I'll bet you financials go through the roof. So I thought I would buy some calls in ICE. ICE was trading at like 123 ish, 123 and a half. I bought some 125 calls for maybe 50 cents. It was going to expire tomorrow, so they were really cheap. They're lottos. And I woke up the next morning, and sure enough, they had actually put this restriction out in the U.S. markets about financial stocks, and all of them were rocketing to the sky. And of course, I look in pre-market, ICE is like 135, and I'm thinking, I'm going to coin money here, right? So market opens, ICE goes to 140, 145, 150, and I'm watching my options, and for some reason my options are trading at 1350 by 1390. Now it doesn't make any sense. I'm thinking to myself, I've got like $25 worth of profit in there. They should be at least 25 bucks, if not more. 155 on ICE, right? Remember, these are 125 calls.
Hmm.
And again, still trading at 1350 by 1390. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, just close them out. And then the other part of me is saying, are you crazy? You've got like another, 15, 16 points of profit that's owed to you. And I sat there and I sat there and I sat there. And finally I said, forget it. And I hit the bid and I closed them out. Well, what I found out later in the day was that the market makers in the option pits, because they were not allowed to short these stocks, they couldn't lay off their risk. And they just walked back from the market. They said, we're not making a market anymore. And so ICE ended up coming all the way back down. 1390 was the highest price it ever hit. And by the end of the day, it actually ended up, I think it was actually like $1. And the lesson I learned there is that when markets break, don't try and be smarter than the market, right? When markets break, just get out, get flat, don't try to get cute. Markets don't break a lot, and
Hmm.
people are used to things working in the market, but I've been through the flash crash. We saw all those limit down days during the pandemic.
Hmm.
I was there in 1987 when the market dropped 23% in one day. So that was a really important lesson that, when things are breaking, just get out of the market. Don't try to be cute. Don't try to be smarter than the market. It's just a recipe for disaster.
That options one just blew my mind because yeah, you just think you've got the intrinsic value in there. They should be selling for it. There should be some sort of robotic systems. I was working in the hedge fund space around that time, and I remember things going wild. I remember people with it's a little bit more exotic, but a lot of the hedge funds at the time were trading CDOs and all these obscure, risk instruments on mortgages and stuff like that. And it was a bit of the same thing where they just couldn't get anything priced because you're right. If there's enough market makers around and they're just like, I'm not going to take any trades, then what do you do? Who do you sell to? I think it also hits home a little bit of the point you made earlier in this conversation where you said you only trade stocks that are doing a high enough volume a day. And that has a lot to do with the annoyance that can come for being right on a position, but the position is so illiquid that you can't get your price. And for me, there's nothing more annoying than that you think a stock is going to go up and it goes up, but the spread is so wide that you end up not making very much or even losing money, even though you were correct on the underlying movement. So I think that's a good one. I just always love
Yeah,
those questions because those, in my opinion, as traders, that's when we learn, is when, we get either hit really hard or we just get really, really annoyed.
yeah, and also just to circle back on that, we remember we saw crude oil futures go negative,
Yeah.
right? Right. That's something where the market was breaking, right?
Hmm.
We saw XIV blow up a couple of years ago, right? The problem is that when the market breaks, everybody's trying to go for the exit at the same time, which perpetuates the breakage, right? It's another reason why you should always probably have some stops in, even if you're not in the market. It's another reason why you should have a backup plan. Like I wrote a post about this once where, if you're really active in the market, you should probably have a little one of those little backup things for your setup, your CPU in case you lose
Hmm.
power. You still have internet. I have a couple of different brokerage accounts so that like we had a time maybe 6 months ago where Interactive Brokers went down. Right, nobody could figure out what was happening. I was able to short my position that I was long in IB in a different account and a different brokerage, so that even though I couldn't close out my position on IB, I was able to
Hedge,
neutralize it
yeah.
by putting in a position, right? So, and people will say like, yeah, it seems a little extreme, but again, until it happens, right? When
Yeah.
it happens, then you are glad that you've prepared and you have that mindset.
Well, and that's why it's a black swan, right? If you knew what it was, it wouldn't be a black swan. So I think the bare minimum you could do there, and I'd be shocked how many people don't do this, is if your broker has a mobile application, is have it, right? I talked to a trader the other day, who I was chatting them about that. I think it was the same thing with IB when it went down. There's nothing you could have done there, but we were just talking about this kind of contingency planning, and he trades on a desktop, and I was like, oh well, you've got an iPad or a phone or something around that's connected outside of your house, and he's like, no, no, I don't. It was like a security thing for him. I'm like, no, do if you got to do two-factor authentication, whatever you got to do, just make sure you can get to the broker if you have to in a pinch, because when things go down, that's probably when is when you need it the most. So
And a lot of times, the mobile app for your brokerage is way easier to navigate than
yeah.
the desktop. And I've got my phone right here. I always call it. I say this is my remote control for the market because oftentimes I'll place my trades on my mobile phone because, especially in my longer term accounts, like a Fidelity trading platform is the most Byzantine thing you've ever seen, right? So,
Yeah.
but doing it on their mobile app, that makes sense.
Well, same with IB. I've noticed, and at Trade Ideas, we can connect our system to Interactive Brokers. So I usually trade through that. But I opened up, I think it's Trader Workstation, they call it, their actual platform for the first time in a while. And yeah, it is old and slow and cumbersome and yeah,
It's the
not good.
worst.
Yeah.
I've traded with Interactive Brokers for 25 years. They have the widest array of things you can trade, the best pricing, and the
Mhm.
worst interface. And so that's why it's great when you can get something like Trade Ideas that lays over the top. It's like when Mosaic came out. I'm going to date myself, but when Mosaic, the browser came out, right? It took all this digital texty sort of interface for the web and it made it really nice and easy to navigate. So when you got something like Trade Ideas, you just lay it over Interactive Brokers. You got the same execution, the same choice, the same commission structure, but a much more an easier to navigate interface.
Yeah. And for my Canadian brethren over here, Interactive Brokers is almost our only option. And you probably, as an American, you probably don't even know this, but we banned payment for order flow. So payment for order flow was illegal. So we are still in the world up here where most brokers are charging $9.99 or $14.99 for trades like it was in America, what, 10, 15 years ago when they started to
Longer than
go.
that.
Yeah. So it's IB or nothing, but their phone application's okay, but yeah, the download's just a
Hey,
nightmare.
hey, speaking of Canada, I don't know. You probably can't see this on the you don't have the widescreen, but I got the professor right here. Right here.
Oh, nice.
Right?
Barely see. Oh, it's
Yeah.
glare. That's
Yeah. Sorry. It's Neil Peart. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Okay, now I see it. That's great. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I always like to
I'm not-
indoctrinate people into Canada, and say, hey, You're an honorary Canadian. So Sean has gotten that a while ago because he always likes to say, because he's lived in not Boulder, when he was in Buffalo. He said that
Mm.
basically made him, Buffalo, New York basically made him Canadian. So I see a lot of your pictures down in California, and I get incredibly jealous sometimes, especially times like that when it's frozen up here. But you should definitely come up. You know, we've got some cool stuff up here, and I know you're a craft beer guy. We've got some nice beers up here as well.
Yeah, we
But
want
yeah,
to get Banff is where we want to go to, and also Quebec. We're really excited to try to get up there at some point.
if you're ever near Quebec, let me know. I can get there. Banff, I'm on the other side, so I'm above New York in Nova Scotia. Banff is absolutely amazing, and you 100% have to go. I was there a couple of years ago and hanging out on like a glacial lake where it's the top of a mountain and everything's melted and it's just this lake out of nowhere that's got nothing in it and it's completely clean and clear. And for someone who lives by the water, California I guess has both water and mountains, but the whole Banff thing, the mountains there are absolutely beautiful. And then Montreal, if you can get up to Quebec, old Montreal is absolutely amazing. That's actually, again, Sean's getting a lot of shout outs here. That's the last time I hung out with Sean in person. Is we walked up Mount Royal in the mountain in the middle of old Montreal and checked that out, and it's absolutely amazing. But I think you should come if you're gonna get that far, you should come all the way out to Nova Scotia. We have geez, not a lot, but we have a lot of pubs. We have it's a very it's the maritime kind of style and philosophy where everything's a lot of fishermen's and lobster and all that kind of stuff. If you're in for that,
Sounds great.
awesome. Well, thank you, Brian. I don't want to take up the rest of your day. I think this was great. I loved having you on. I love having these conversations. Make sure you're going to thelundloop.com and you're checking that out, and check out BC Lund on Twitter, which has been below you there the whole time. Do you have anything to leave the folks with before we go?
No, I mean, we would love to have you as part of the Lund Loop community with one codicil: no a-holes allowed, right? And this is important,
Perfect.
right? Because BinTwit is just a toxic sewer, and part of
Yeah.
the reason that I created this community is like I don't want people like that. And unfortunately, the Lund Loop community is great. I've only had to kick one person out in 2 years, but
Wow.
we would love to have you if you're interested in taking your trading and your investing to the next level.
Yeah, and I can personally vouch for that. I would definitely go check it out. Thank you very much for coming by, Brian. I hope to have you back soon.
Thanks for having me.